Okay, we're continuing quotes, Holy Grail of Wisdom quotes by me, Pete Rogers. This is Isaac Newton. We're going in alphabetical order. He lived from 1642 to 1727. His father died before he was born. His mother married a rich guy who didn't want to be a stepfather, so his mother just abandoned him. He was raised by relatives. His real father had been an illiterate farmer who he had lots of notebooks. He would write in very small handwriting. He's sort of like a teenage Aristotle. And then they tried to make him into a farmer, but he just daydreamed too much and he got whipped. He wasn't a good farmer. Then he was largely raised, by an apothecary as a young man. He learned about chemistry, pharmacology. He was fascinated by alchemy, the idea which later became chemistry, science, religion, magic, astronomy, all that stuff. One of his relatives got him into college at Cambridge as what's called a subsizer, as a servant to the nobles, servant to the aristocrats. The lowest of the three classes over there. The highest, of course, was the nobles. And they could just, get by without even studying too much. Then the pensioners were in the intermediate, and he was the low life. The subsizers, okay, like I said, were servants. After he graduated, 1665, that was the big year. That's anno mirabilis, the miracle year. There was like a plague had occurred over there in England, and he went to the family, had a cottage at that time in Woolsthorpe, and he just wanted to study. He was there for 18 months. And paper was real scarce in those days, so he wrote really miniature handwriting. And he would just sit around in his room day after day trying to solve complex problems. He was very afraid of disease, too. He had once inadvertently poisoned himself with mercury. Anyways, what did he study in college? He studied Aristotle, Aristotelianism, scholasticism, astronomy, Nicomachean ethics of Aristotle. He was very passionate about religion, reading the Bible back and forth, and he thought Trinitarianism was false, a form of idolatry. He almost got himself in big trouble. He could have been booted out of the university. One of his friends protected him. Let's see, what else? Then he, of course, saw the apple fall from the tree. That went with his ideas about gravity and the old story. He became popular. Voltaire actually did a lot to help popularize him. Voltaire had been in exile from France, and he was in England. And he wrote a thing, Letters from England, English letters. Okay. And while he was there in Woolsthorpe, he figured out calculus, the laws of gravity, the physics of mechanics, the principles of optics. I mean, the guy's the smartest person who ever lived. Him and Aristotle. Okay, here's a quote by Professor Alan Kors, who gives lectures on this time, historical time. He said, in Woolsthorpe, Newton developed the idea of gravity as he pondered what pulls an apple to the ground and what holds the moon in orbit. Newton's book, Principia, was a mathematical explanation of the Copernican heliocentric system and of the Kepler's elliptical orbits. Okay, I'll show you the painting. The thumbnail I'm using is Newton in his garden at Woolsthorpe by Robert Hanna, which shows him, with the fallen apple to the ground. Alexander Pope, the great poet of England, wrote, nature and nature's laws lay hid in the night. God said, let Newton be, and all was light. Yeah, he sort of inspired everyone that mankind could be so brilliant. But again, he was seen as a heretic to the English Anglican Church because he denied the unity of the Trinity. He felt God the Father was superior to the Son who obeyed him. Newton had studied multiple versions of the Bible, including in other languages, and he felt the King James Version had added too much emphasis on the Trinity. He thought that God the Father, again, was superior to the Son who followed him. He said the Trinity as one was not in the original version of the Bible, and he felt that this was what you would call the Arian heresy. Okay. Newton said that mathematics is the language of God. Newton was not that famous until around 1700. He later became much more famous after Voltaire started writing about him. Voltaire saw his funeral and was very impressed. Okay, and Voltaire also said, look, in French, we only have cathedrals for religious stuff. In Westminster Abbey, they also put their scientists. Okay, how smart are the English compared to the French? It was a very popular book, English Letters, to see France from the point of view of a man in England, which Voltaire wrote when he was in exile. Voltaire was a BS artist, though, too. Just to be aware, Voltaire, was part of this group like Edward Gibbons from England, putting forth this idea of the Enlightenment. We're no longer a bunch of Dark Ages, Middle Ages, Catholic stupids. We're now the enlightened people. Okay, but Voltaire was part of the philosophe movement of philosophers in France that pushed atheism and that destroyed France, led to the French Rev 1789 to 1794. Okay, so Voltaire was a big part of that with Diderot, Rousseau, all these BS artists. Okay, very destructive. And it's really not true because atheism destroys science, corrupts everything, versus real science came out of the Catholic Church. And the Middle Ages were not the Dark Ages. Why is it that the Renaissance only happened in Europe? Because the Middle Ages led up to it, okay? Scholasticism, Thomas Aquinas, the cathedrals were where all the universities were. The Pope managed all these universities. 35 craters on the moon are named after Jesuit astronomers, okay? The Catholic Church was the foundation of science. That's a fact. It's a historical fact. You can study it. The Catholic Church gets bad-mouthed a lot because people want to bad-mouth it, okay? But most of what you hear about it is not true. It's not perfect, but it's the best institution that ever existed in mankind. And I say that based on extensive historical study of it, okay? It's why you have the scientific method. It's why the university system developed, okay? It's why Europe was the place where all these magnificent things happened. They developed all these agricultural techniques. The stirrup for the horse harness to plow the fields, the iron plows to plow the fields. That's why their food production went through the roof and they had a giant population expansion, okay? Haley was another scientist who was a big fan of Newton and promoted his work. Okay, Newton is seen as a transitional figure, according to Will Durant, between the age of reason and the so-called Enlightenment. Again, I think the Enlightenment is a bogus term. I think it was kind of an evil trick like a Voltaire to call his own age the Enlightenment. Oh, now we are enlightened. And then the Middle Ages, when a tremendous amount of great work was done, oh, that's the Dark Ages. That's all not true. It is true there was a diminishment of literature because they lost the big cities when Rome was collapsed, okay? So there wasn't as much of a literary market, but there was tremendous scientific developments. And again, the whole 1200s with Thomas Aquinas was scholasticism. There was a Carolingian Renaissance around 800 AD. Okay, why did this all come from Europe? Because Europe was moving and progressing. It's the other places that were backward, all the other places in the world in comparison. That's a well-known historical fact. I've talked about that in other lectures, so we're not going to go into all that. Now, okay, well, they said the Renaissance was slain by the Reformation. Yeah, Martin Luther destroyed the Renaissance, Protestantism, jerk, iconoclasm, okay? It was scholasticism in the late Middle Ages that led to the Renaissance with a rebirth of interest in the Greeks and Romans, and also the fall of Constantinople, 1453. Okay, Edmund Halley, in describing Newton's achievement in the Principia, nearer to God no man may approach than Isaac Newton. Professor Alan Kors, Newton inspired the scientific community. Newton had shown that the universe was knowable. Okay, William Wordsworth, the great English poet, he said, Newton was a mind forever voyaging on strange seas of thought alone. Yeah, he's so far ahead of everybody else, nobody could, stay that close to what he was doing. John Maynard Keyes, Newton's peculiar gift was the power of holding continuously in his mind a purely mental problem until he had seen through it. Daniel Robinson, Newton is the saint of science. Yeah, just kind of like Socrates is the saint of philosophy, Newton is the saint of science, okay? And it's true. They both had very strong religious tendencies, and so-called Platonism, comes out of Socrates' teaching, and it's also thought by many to be one of the foundations of the Catholic Church. And it's strongly related to it. It's not in foundation, but it's strongly related to the Catholic Church. Okay, Daniel Robinson, the philosophy teacher, continues. He said, Bacon was the John the Baptist, making the path straight for Newton, the bringer of new light to science. And again, Isaac Newton is probably the greatest genius of time, a religious Catholic. Oh, he wasn't Catholic, he was a Protestant, religious fanatic. Johann Sebastian Bach, religious fanatic, is the greatest composer of all time. Michelangelo, religious fanatic, the greatest painter and sculptor of all time. There are other greater painters, but he's a magnificent painter. He's the greatest sculptor of all time. All of them, they're head over heels in religion. Okay, that's what makes them so great. If you're working for God, talk about motivation. If you want to leave a legacy to God, that's a big inspiration. Isaac Newton, he who thinks half-heartedly will not believe in God, but he who really thinks has to believe in God. That's true too. And I'll tell you, all these people say you don't need God for science, or you don't need God for biology, for evolution. It's not true. I can tell you, I'm an intense scholar of evolutionary biology, and I can tell you, you need God. You can't explain where all this stuff came from without God. It's way, way, way over our heads. Anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Hey, watch James Tours, watch Michael Behe, watch Stephen Meyer, okay? There's tons of them. Rosale Fana, you'll see there's tons of people who've looked at it closely, and it's pretty obvious. It's way beyond anything we can comprehend, the complexity of the origin of life and the origin of complexity in life. Okay, again, Darwinian evolution can only explain microevolution. It cannot explain macroevolution. Isaac Newton, quote, "I have a fundamental belief in the Bible as the Word of God, written by those who are inspired. I study the Bible daily. All my discoveries have been made in answer to prayer." Okay, you want to be great? Be religious, okay? You want to be inspired to great achievement, to leave a legacy of something magnificent? Be religious, okay? That's one of the reasons why I stayed Catholic, is because I'm like, not only do I think it's the best religion, it makes people happy. It makes people happy here on earth. Protestantism is too much, do what I say or you'll burn in hell. It's like, yeah, screw you, pal. I like Catholicism. Catholicism, let's all be nice to each other and enjoy life as much as we can, and let's learn from everything around us, okay? That's Catholicism. It's much more intellectual. Let's see what else. He says, atheism is so senseless. When I look at the solar system, I see the Earth at the right distance from the sun to receive the proper amounts of heat and light. That did not happen by chance. The design of the universe proves the existence of God. A student asked him, "How did you discover the law of gravitation?" And Newton said, "By thinking about it all the time." Okay. Albert Einstein had said something similar. It's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with my problems longer. There's this intensity and persistence of a marathon-like effort to discover something. Okay, and I remember, Walter Payton, the great Chicago Bears football running back, Super Bowl champs, 1985. Somebody asked Walter Payton, they said, "Why is it that you're such a great running back? You're not that big, you're not that strong, you're not that fast." And he said, "Because I want it more than anybody else." Walter Payton was always training, running all these sprints up hills and doing all kinds of things, lifting weights, and he was the strong, silent type. He would be real quiet a prolonged amount of time, and he said, "I like to be quiet so when the time comes, I can take the upper hand." He was just an awesome running back. Anyways, getting back to all of this with Isaac Newton, next quote, "The best way to understanding is a few good examples. If we could understand the cause of motion, we could understand the world." Isaac Newton quote. Okay, and then, Tesla had said, if we could understand energy, okay, we could understand the world. Okay, interviewer had asked Dr. Isaac Newton, "Why did you make your book Principia Mathematica so technical?" Newton said, "To avoid being baited by smatterers in mathematics." Okay, we talked about him just after getting his bachelor's degree, going out to Woolsthorpe. All right, I kind of had that section a little duplicated. Okay. All right, just one quote from John Newton. He's the guy who wrote the words to Amazing Grace. He said, "Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see." And if you look at the song Amazing Grace, the best version of it ever, out of all the versions, is sung by Judy Collins, the Irish singer. Amazing Grace, female voice. The best version sang by a male singer would be Paul Robeson. Okay. The best version played on bagpipes would be like by the Scottish Dragoons. Okay. They're all magnificent. So anyways, I hope you found that helpful.